What's up, and welcome into a fresh Locked On Bulls. It's crossover time, Bulls fans. Joining us on today's episode is the guy making those great videos on the Bulls Central YouTube channel. His name is Jamal Aflatuni. I'm Matt. That's Big Dave. We're getting Jamal's thoughts on this Bulls preseason action and roster decisions on today's episode of Locked On Bulls. Let's go.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here are your hosts, Matt Peck and Big Dave Watson.
What's up, and welcome into Locked On Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Matt Peck. You can follow me on Twitter at Bulls_Peck. You can follow my co-host Big Dave Watson at BAWL Sports. And our guest today is Jamal Aflatuni. He is the creator, manager, and star of the Bulls Central YouTube channel. Jamal, welcome to the pod, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. It's really a pleasure to be meeting with you guys.
Of course, man. I had the privilege of joining you on one of your videos earlier this summer talking about these Bulls offseason moves. And, you know, it was time to do the reverse. It's all about, I love cross-content kind of stuff when it comes to Bulls podcasting and Bulls YouTube. To all of our listeners out there, if you haven't found Jamal yet on YouTube, go find him and his channel. It's Bulls Central on YouTube. We'll put a link to his channel in the description of this episode so you can find it easily. And then you can also follow him on Twitter at Bulls Central with 2 L's, correct, Jamal? 2 L's?
Yeah, you know, they already had the Twitter handle in use, and I had to figure something out. I was like, I guess I'll throw an extra L in there, you know.
Right, yeah. So it's at Bulls Central. All right, let's dive right in with this, Jamal. Bulls 3-0 in the preseason thus far with one more preseason game to go. We can get into specifics and each of the games individually if you like, but what has been the thing that has stuck out to you the most to say, wow, didn't necessarily expect to see that?
I think I didn't expect the guys to be clicking off the bat right away. One of the things that I had really talked about a lot on my show was, obviously, as Bulls fans, we have very high expectations of this team. You know, we think, oh, we made all of these moves, we're going to be great. And I try to be a little more realistic in managing expectations, saying like, there might be a bit of a learning curve with these guys, right? They're going to be good. They have a lot of talent. There's no denying that. And I think it's going to take a little time to develop that chemistry. And right away, you just saw them clicking in that very first preseason game. The passing, the ball movement, they were limiting turnovers. They just almost seemed like they had played together for a really long time. So obviously there are certain players that stood out to me as well, but I think as a whole, that's what kind of was a surprise to me, was just how easily they're making the game look for a team that is completely been overhauled. I mean, all of these guys are new to this roster, new to Billy Donovan's system, most of them for the most part. So I think that was sort of the biggest surprise to me. I love what I'm seeing so far. Again, we got to add the preseason qualifier, right? It's like, it is just preseason. We'll see how things turn out when we get into the regular season, when they actually start playing against harder competition, because even in the preseason games, these are against easier teams that aren't even fully healthy. But that's been the biggest surprise for me, for sure.
I would say in these preseason games that we've watched, they've been really, really good on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Which side has impressed you the most? What they've done offensively or what they've done defensively?
Defensively, for sure. I mean, I think, we knew that this team was going to be good on offense. We knew that they were going to be an elite offensive team. When you got 3 players that can average over 20 points per game, you got Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic, they're going to be good on offense. I think what surprised me, but not as surprising, because I actually thought that they would be decent, is on the defensive end. I think you look at what all of these national media outlets, who I won't name them, but they provide lazy analysis and takes for shock value. But I think we all know who I'm talking about. But most of these outlets are talking about how the Bulls are going to be terrible on defense, how, their offense is going to be good, but their defense is going to be so bad that they're barely going to make the playoffs, even if they make the playoffs, which is absolutely absurd. Because, I mean, you look at the lineup, compared to who they lost on the defensive end. They lost
Right.
Thaddeus Young, Daniel Tice. Arguably, those are the two best defenders they lost. They also
I
lost
guess you
Garrett
could
Temple.
throw Garrett Temple in there. Right. Yeah.
I was just kidding. They lost Garrett Temple. He's a decent defender as well, but really, I mean, I know they subtracted a lot more players than just that, but those are the ones in my view who were the best defenders. And despite the Bulls being pretty meh on defense last year, I would actually say that they were kind of a poor defensive team as far as like the eye test goes anyway, but they managed to finish 12th in defensive rating. Then you add, a guy like Lonzo Ball, who was a very underrated defender, a perimeter defender, something the Bulls didn't have at all last season. On top of that, you add Alex Caruso, one of the best defenders to come off the bench last season. You had Tony Bradley, who isn't, the rim protector that Tice is. I won't argue that, but still a decent defender in the paint at the rim. Yeah, Derek Jones Jr., a good wing defender in his own right with those lanky arms. They had draft Io, who in my view has been a very scrappy defender the limited time that we've seen him in the preseason. You maybe even add Stanley Johnson in the mix, who I know, hasn't made the team, and he may not, but I think he will when all is said and done. We can talk about that. And that's not including the guys that they already have on the defensive end, like Patrick Williams, Troy Brown Jr. So I think that this team will be surprisingly good on defense, and you're already seeing that in the preseason. I don't think they're going to be an elite defensive team by any means, but they're not going to be horrible like some people are making them out to be, not with the level of talent they have. And that's not even factoring in, Zach LaVine. I'm sure you guys watched him in the Olympics when he was in Tokyo.
Of course.
He played pretty decent defense. So it's like, if you can have all of these guys, at least just putting in the effort on the defensive end, they're going to be good. And so, Big Dave, back to your question, that's what surprised me the most, because I think the expectation is that they were going to be quick in transition. They were going to be fast. They were going to be doing well on offense. But I think I didn't expect that the defensive effort was going to be there right off the bat, and it has.
Yeah, I think it's something that Billy preached from day one of training is just engaging on the defensive end. I don't care where you are as far as your talent defensively, wherever you are talent-wise, if you're engaged and all five guys on the court, whoever's out there, are all engaged, you can generate those amazing fast break opportunities that we've been treated to in these preseason games so far, where we get to see Lonzo and Zach get out and run in transition, and Caruso making no-look passes on the break. You got to get the steals in order to do that. And whether it's Zach, even DeMar DeRozan and Vooch, both of whom are known, and I think for the most part rightly so, as subpar defenders, just getting their hands in passing lanes, being disruptive. You might get beat one-on-one a couple of times, or DeMar might get caught, ball watching off the ball or whatever. That's gonna happen. But if you're engaged defensively at all times, you can't create those turnovers. And so I guess that leads me to my next one for you, Jamal, is what has been most entertaining for you to watch so far with all of these new pieces we have when it comes to the Bulls scoring the basketball? Has it been those transition and fast break opportunities we've seen? Or have you actually enjoyed more some of the half-court stuff we've seen, where you have Vooch operating in pick-and-roll scenarios with all of Lonzo, LaVine, DeMar, picking and choosing his spots to get his ISO stuff. Zach LaVine getting to operate off the ball more offensively. What of all those things has really piqued your curiosity offensively?
I mean, really, all of them have been great, right? But I think the thing that stands out to me most is just the speed and transition. Just because we haven't seen that from a Bulls team in so long. We haven't had like a true playmaking type player. Now we really have two, right? I mean, everyone talks about Lonzo Ball being that playmaker that we so desperately needed, but DeMar DeRozan is also a very good playmaker as well. And even Zach LaVine, when he wants to be, he can be a really good playmaker too. And so I think seeing all of that together and how quickly they've just been able to move up and down the court, that's what's been the most exciting to me on the offensive end. I absolutely love it. Like I said, it's why I can't wait for the regular season to get started, because it's like you almost don't want to get ahead of yourself. Like it's like we're getting like they look incredible. They're going to be unstoppable going into the season. It's like, well, it is preseason. Let's let's see what happens in the regular season. But I think based on what we've seen thus far, those are very encouraging signs, whether it's preseason or not. So that to me has been what's standing out the most for sure.
I want to get your thoughts on some of those other rotational pieces that you mentioned, and Io among them, because boy, he showed Bulls fans something in that second Cavs game with just some ice cold buckets late. Before we do that, quick break to tell all of our listeners about Sleeper, the amazing fantasy basketball app. In 2018, the fantasy sports experts at Sleeper realized the fantasy basketball was broken. Games were being won and lost just based on whose players had more games scheduled that week. It was dumb. It made no sense. It required no strategy at all. It was dumb luck. So here's what happened. In 2020, Sleeper released a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball. It's called Game Pick, and it's only available on that Sleeper app. In Game Pick, owners pick a single game per week for each starter in their lineup to count towards their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games played between opponents. So simple. The days of losing because your opponent's players just have more games than your players that week are over. The days of mindless busy work are over. The days of giving up halfway through the season because of all of that stupid busy work also over. Whether you prefer redraft leagues, keeper leagues, dynasty leagues, Game Pick has you covered. Sleeper cracked the fantasy basketball code. And if you play fantasy football like I do, like my guy Big Dave here does, if you prefer building out a weekly roster, a weekly strategy versus all of that busy daily busy work of DFS, you're going to love Game Picks. So download the Sleeper app and start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. All right, Big Dave, where are we going next, buddy?
Job well done, sir.
Dave wasn't kidding before we hit record when he asked you if you wanted to read one. I mean, the fewer ads I have to read, the better.
It was his whole plan to get me on this show. He wanted me to be on here, but his whole plan was just to give me the ads to read. Yeah, that's right. I'm telling you. I know Matt. I know how it goes. I know it. Well done, sir. Well done.
I'm lazy.
Well done. But Jamal, I do want to ask you though. I do want to ask you this. With all the new players that we have, you know what I'm saying? Basically a whole new roster that we got. Except for, maybe Patrick Williams, Kobe White, and Zach and those guys. Who's the guy that you're looking at when you see all these new players and you're like, this is the player that I think will benefit the most from having this new lineup, this new offense, this new system in place? Who's the player that you think will benefit the most from this?
Well, I'll give you a cliche answer that probably most people would give, and then I'll give maybe kind of a more unique one. But I mean, it's got to be Lonzo, right? A new situation, a new environment that can really harness the skills and the things that he's good at, rather than what he was doing last year. As he mentioned, operating as sort of like a 3-and-D type player, and to now be in a system. First of all, a team that wanted him to be there, a big market, which we all know he wanted to be in a big market, and a team that needed both a playmaker and a defender, which he fits both of those bills, right? So I think that's one player that's going to benefit the most from being in a new roster, a new environment, a new system. But I think another guy, and he really has stepped out to me, who I wouldn't say that I was critical of, maybe a little more skeptical when it was first announced that we were signing him, but Alize Johnson. I mean, a guy that has only played barely 50 games in his entire NBA career, has just kind of fought and clawed his way through the G League, and now has been able to make his way onto an NBA roster. I know that his contract hasn't been fully guaranteed yet. Right. It's possible he may not end up making the roster. I think he absolutely will. He may even end up being in the rotation when all is said and done. But I think for a guy like him, where they're, the Bulls, who don't have a ton of depth at the power forward position, that could be a huge opportunity for him to really showcase what he's about. Still a young player. I think he's only 25. So it's not like, he's sort of already hit his peak and is going to be on the decline soon. He still has the ability to get better and better. And what you saw from him in that preseason, just bodying guys way bigger than him, getting those rebounds and putting it back up. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I barely knew of Alize. I mean, you saw like the crazy, like a couple games he had with the Nets last season. You're like, oh, okay, a G leaguer that played some good games. Right. But he's really impressed me. So I think he's another guy that's really going to benefit in a system where, the Bulls are in pretty good shape across the board when you look at this lineup, but where they do lack a little bit is at that 4 spot. And so a guy like Alize, who is good in that role, who they're just going to need him to crash the boards and just be that hustle type player, almost like a bigger David Nwaba, if you will. So I think that he's really going to benefit from the system, and I can't wait to see him, watch him in the regular season. I really do hope he makes the team, but I honestly think there's no doubt in my mind.
No doubt.
Are you an official member of the Bring Back David Nwaba Nwaba fan club,
Dude,
Jamal?
I love David Nwaba. He's like
There's some
he was
Bulls
like one of
fans
my
who are
favorite
still
Bulls players.
mad that he got let go. Like, it's
Let him
crazy.
go. Let him
Where was it?
go.
Like the Cavs? Did he go to the Cavs right after the
Went to
Bulls?
the
Or
went to the Cavs after the
yeah,
Bulls, and then he went to Houston, I believe.
yeah,
After
Mhm.
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah. So somewhere there are 5 Nwabas in the NBA. That's all I know.
Yes,
There's
yes. Oh,
somewhere out
Stacy, the five, yeah,
But
five David Nwabas all over the place. Yeah,
They're all over.
But I think Dave and I are both with you, Jamal, as when it comes to Alizé. Like, not only has he played these minutes in preseason like a guy who has earned himself a spot on this roster, but maybe even minutes.
yeah,
And that's even if Tony Bradley is healthy and ready to go by the time we get to our actual regular season opener, October 20th. Which, guess what? That's only 8 days away. And like we're hearing that Patrick Williams is expected back any day now, maybe even their final preseason game on Friday. Bradley, not so much, but even when Bradley does come back, yeah, Bradley can give you a bit more rim protection than Alizé can, but Alizé's activity on the glass on both ends, man, holy moly. And like, I
yeah,
remember when the Bulls picked him up earlier this offseason, and he had that tweet that was like, hey, what's up, Chicago? And it was a gif of Rodman like playing to the crowd at the
yeah,
United Center.
yeah.
And I was like, I
Yeah.
love this guy already.
Right,
And like,
right,
Yeah.
right.
I don't know if either of you guys had a chance to look at it yet. Earlier today, Rob
Yeah, I
Schaefer
saw
for
it.
NBC Sports
Yeah,
had a quick back and forth with Alizé after today's practice and wrote an article about him. He has been studying Dennis Rodman
Mhm.
game tape.
I love it.
I
I
mean,
love it.
Yeah.
what more do you need to be convinced that this dude is going to bust his butt every time he's out there?
Yeah,
And he's like, he's like probably studying Dennis Rodman tape, being like, boom, this way, boom, that way, boom, over here. It's just like Last Dance style. So
Dude.
that leads me to this, though. I think a lot of people, Jamal, are wondering who is going to be maybe that person left out, on the outside looking in when it comes to these final cuts. We saw that the Bulls already waived Ethan Thompson and Daniel Aturu, guys that the Bulls said they hoped would, make their way to the Windy City squad if they wanted to stick around. But there's kind of a few names on the bubble, and I think a lot of people are wondering if it's down to two players, and it's the other Johnson, Stanley Johnson, who we've seen some things from this preseason, but he hasn't made his impact felt on the games, I think, in the way that Alizé Johnson has. And then the other guy, Matt Thomas, who he's gotten some run, a guy who can maybe, add some shooting depth to that bench. Maybe people are a little bit worried about the amount of shooting on the Bulls' second unit. Where do you stand with those two guys, Stanley Johnson and Matt Thomas? And do you think there's anybody else, if it's not one of those two guys, who's going to be essentially the last one left to be cut from
yeah.
the roster?
I mean, it's definitely between those two guys. I think there wasn't any surprise with Ethan Thompson and Daniel Turo, and I think Tyler Cook obviously is the other option. I think he likely will get waived as well. It's definitely between those two, and I hesitate because Matt Thomas would be a good option because, like you said, the Bulls don't really have a ton of shooting in the second unit. My only hesitation with that, though, is we've got such a crowded backcourt right now. I mean, Kobe White's going to be out for the beginning of the season, but once he comes back, it's like, where does Matt even fit at that point? How is he even going to be able to get minutes? And maybe, it's kind of a moot point. It's like both of these players, whether it's Stanley Johnson or Matt Thomas, they're not probably going to be in the rotation. They're not going to be getting many minutes unless it's in garbage time. So does it really matter? But I think for a guy like Stanley Johnson, a former lottery pick, hasn't just really lived up to the hype that most people expected of him coming out of high school. I mean, people forget he was a number 3 recruit coming into college, and then obviously was the number 8 overall pick. I think it was the final year. He was just a freshman, one and done, and he just hasn't really panned out, wherever he's been. And what I like about Stanley Johnson over Matt Thomas is the defense, because I still think the Bulls could use that defense, especially at the wing. I know that they're a little crowded at the wing, but he also has some versatility in that he can play the 4. And again, we talk about the lack of depth at the 4. So if I had to choose between the two, it would probably be Stanley Johnson. It doesn't mean that I think he's a better player than Matt Thomas, because you can always use outside shooting. But I think overall, Johnson just gives the Bulls the versatility that they're probably going to need, and it doesn't log jam us in the backcourt with everyone else we have. But would love to hear what you guys think, though.
That's true, man.
Dave?
But that's a good. I think Stanley Johnson. I hope he finds his way on this team. You know what? it feels good because this is honestly a problem the Bulls haven't had in years.
Oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like, so it feels good to talk about this honestly because I'm like, it was slim pickings for a very long time.
Usually we're trying to scramble our way to just get 15 guys.
Exactly. Like 15 warm bodies, and we would have took 12, and 13 just kind of lukewarm. We would have went with that. But Stanley Johnson, man, might be that guy that's out. You mentioned Tyler Cook too. I think Matt Thomas finds his way on this team because the one thing I thought the Bulls didn't have, and I'd said to Matt before, was a spot up shooter. I wanted them to have that. I think every team kind of just needs that guy. That's what he does. Every team needs a goon. Every team kind of needs a spot up shooter. That's all he comes in and does. And
right.
I think Matt Thomas played his way in those first 2 preseason games, especially when he hit that 4-point 3-point shot. I was like, okay, yeah, this dude belongs on a roster. So I believe he's going to make it. But oh man, Stanley Johnson might be that odd man out, man. Because honestly, I think I was a little higher on him than I was Alizé coming into it. Because Alizé, I just said will be the goon. I just had him in my head like, oh, he'll be the dude to come in that we use who has 6 fouls and maybe scores a few points, and will just be that toughness. He'll be the goon for us. And he's been the goon, but he's the goon that has to play now because of the rebounds and the impact that he has. So he kind of played his way right on in. Same way with Javonte Green, just kind of played his way just right on in to rotation minutes. And I haven't seen Stanley Johnson really do that yet. But I know he has the skill to. I know he has the talent. I mean, he has that 3-point shot. I mean, the ability, the length, being that wing, can play that 3 and that 4. I know he can do those things, but it's just those guys' impact have been just far greater and shown more than I've seen with Stanley. So I don't know if he wants to stay with us as far as the G League goes, but he might be the one. He might be the one.
Well, and the only thing I'll add to that debate as far as Stanley versus Thomas is, and I think it's something that you brought up in an episode right after their first preseason game, Dave, which is because like when Matt Thomas checked in, and I was like, wow, Matt Thomas is getting run this early in the game. And you were like, he's basically, I think Donovan's giving him the Kobe White minutes right now.
Yeah.
The spot up shooter coming in off the bench early in the game. So then, my question there would be, when Kobe White, knock on wood, comes back healthy as scheduled sometime in early mid-November, does Matt Thomas's usefulness on this roster kind of dissipate because you got a much better version of that in Kobe White coming back? And you assume that once Kobe White, Billy Donovan might ramp him up a little bit, it's like, cautiously, but once Kobe's ready to go, he's going to get minutes. And then, Matt Thomas is basically sitting on your bench for the rest of the season, unless somebody else, God forbid, goes down, whereas Stanley might be able to offer you some things that Kobe White doesn't, especially on the defensive end.
That's true. That's true. But I think the thing with that, Matt, is Matt Thomas, more so than Stanley, will have a chance to get more run to show what he can do during the season because of Kobe's injury. So you might go to Matt Thomas to give him a couple of those minutes and things like that. Whereas Stanley Johnson, man, it's going to be tough getting in there at that 3 or that 4, man. When you got DeMar, you got Patrick, you got Alizé, and so on. You got guys who are, even Javonte Green is still, he's the 2 and he's stealing minutes at the 4. So that doesn't help your position either. So it's kind of crowded at that wing position right now. I know it's a crowded backcourt too, but coming off the bench and knowing there'll be some space there that Kobe, with his injury, he won't be there. He'll have a chance to prove himself and show kind of what he can do and showcase. And if he does, then those great tough decisions will come, man. So he'll have a better opportunity to do it than Stanley, I think.
Well, let me ask you guys this, if I may, I'll just steal the show here. Historically speaking, right, Billy Donovan has preferred like 8 to 9 man rotations, more or less, right? Last year kind of wasn't really the case. I talked about this in one of my recent videos. I mean, last year wasn't the case just because the roster was kind of a mess, but typically speaking, he likes shorter man rotations. And so, whether it's Matt Thomas or Stanley Johnson, they're probably not going to get that many minutes, if they do in fact make the team. And so I'm almost curious to know, as far as the rotation goes, will we even see someone like Io get minutes once Kobe gets back? Because I would love to see Io at least get some minutes. Like I've actually been kind of disappointed that Billy's only been putting him in like near the end, of the game in the preseason. It's like give the guy a little more playing time. He's a rookie. It's just the preseason. But that's the first thing you were talking about, Matt Thomas. It's like, well, when Kobe comes back, what's Matt going to do? From my perspective, it's like, well, when Kobe comes back, what's going to happen to Io? Because you got Caruso, you got Kobe. Again, if Billy sticks with those 8 to 9 man rotations, there's probably not really going to be a spot for him.
I think that's your answer. I think, when Kobe comes back, if Io actually even gets minutes before Kobe White's return,
Sure.
and like you said, like we'll see what his rotation boils down to. I think Alze has earned a spot. Clearly, Javonte Green has earned a spot, even assuming, P-Dub comes in and starts at the 4 as planned. Javonte's getting minutes off that bench. I see Io sitting a lot this year. I do. Which, is good and bad. If the Bulls stay healthy, then they don't need a second round draft pick playing big minutes for them. If for whatever reason he finds himself needed, then, like Patrick Williams last season, it's like, all right, Billy's like, hey, baptism by fire, go out there, try and guard somebody. Like, good luck. But, we'll see. Few more thoughts that I want to get from you, Jamal, especially on that guy, Javonte Green, who we just mentioned. But first, Dave, if our listeners and our viewers want to put some money on some sporting events, where might they go?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me this question, man. I've been waiting for you to ask me this all day long. Listen, my man Matt Pack yesterday put some money down. All right? Put some money down on the Monday night game and came up wonderfully. And why did he do that? You know why he did that? You know why he was successful at it? Because he used Bet Online. Because it is your number one spot for pro and college football action this season. Now with the updated website, with the new interface, with the odds, the props, and the contest, Bet Online continues to be your number one source for everything football. Everything. So head to the website or use your mobile device. Sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. And please don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. That is Locked On. Use that and you will receive your bonus. Football, basketball, boxing, tennis, handball, whatever you want to bet on, you can do it here. Take advantage of all the amazing offers available to you and yours for the 2021 season. Bet Online is your fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. Bet Online, where the game starts. Sports.
Have you ever bet on handball before, Big Dave?
I don't want to get into my past, man. I've done things, Jamal. I've done things.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Just say I'm still here.
Good point.
So I think even before Alizé Johnson, Jamal, the Bulls fans' biggest pleasant surprise of preseason was Javonte Green.
Yeah.
Stuffing Lauri Markkanen, bodying Lauri Markkanen, dunking over Lauri Markkanen. Wearing number 24, of course. Right. I think some Bulls fans wondered when we heard the news about Tice, getting that sign trade over to Houston and then paying Alex Caruso that contract. I don't know if any of them are still making noise anymore, but there were some Bulls fans who were like, why didn't you just pay Daniel Tice the money that you paid Alex Caruso? I think I brought this up to Dave at one point in the past, in the offseason. I think Javonte Green was the sneaky reason the Bulls front office made that Celtics trade in the first place. Tice was a nice piece to have for half a season, but I think they knew that they were going to be outbid for his services, so to speak. And they were like, but we can't steal Javonte Green. I mean, what are your impressions of this guy so far? And now, again, assuming that Patrick Williams is in that starting lineup for opening night, how do you see Billy using him off the bench now?
Yeah, I mean, I love Javonte Green. I liked what I saw from him even last season. So, initially after the trade, he wasn't getting really any minutes. And then I can't even remember who they were playing, but they were losing really badly. Javonte Green came in because it was like, I think Billy was almost like, it's garbage time at this point. And Javonte Green just balled out, basically brought them back into the game. I think I want to say this was, maybe it's not. I want to say this was the, oh my goodness, Denzel Valentine, no game.
Oh, against
The
If I had to
Miami?
mean,
The Heat.
and maybe it wasn't against the Heat, but it was a game where like we were slowly coming back, and it was like, oh, we might have been able to win, but then we fell short because that
Right.
happened a lot last season.
Because it
But
was a day
yeah,
that
I mean,
ended in Y last season.
but he was just, I loved his intensity, and he's actually a very athletic player in his ability to like ball handle and dribble drive to the hoop. And so seeing that, I even remember saying on my channel, I was like, look, I actually hope the Bulls can keep Javonte Green. Because you could probably get him for pretty cheap, which they did. And I think a lot of people were like, no, why would we keep Javonte Green? I think that was just sort of a filler as a part of the Daniel Tice trade. So I don't know if that was like their intention all along, so to speak. I think that they probably did want to prioritize Daniel Tice, but I think at the end of the day, like you mentioned, the price point was just too high, and I think they really wanted someone like Alex Caruso, and so that was how the dice sort of fell. But as far as Javonte Green, yeah, has really impressed me in preseason, and if Patrick, comes back and he's fully healthy, which like you mentioned, it's possible that he could come back on Friday. Yeah, I see him being a part of the rotation. I see him, because he's a versatile player. He can play 2, 3, or 4. He can probably come back and be a backup for Patrick Williams or be a backup off the wing as well. I think you always need those hustle and energy type players, those players who probably don't get as much recognition as they deserve. And that kind of they're motivated to play even harder as a result. And that's what you're seeing from Green right now. So I'm curious to see how Billy Donovan's going to use him, once Patrick Williams does come back. And I hope that he does still get good minutes and he is included in that rotation.
You know what's really great too?
Go ahead, Dave.
Real quick. You know what's really great is guys are not huge, and they're playing these other positions like Javonte, 6'4", and we just talked about Alex 6'7", who might be playing center, who's getting rebounds over Taco Fall. I love this so much because Matt knows, Jamal, how much I yelled about Lauri Markkanen and not realizing he's 7 feet tall. And I like these guys who don't know that they're 6'4", who don't know that they're 6'7". In their head, they're 8 feet tall, and that's how they're going to play. And it's just really refreshing. It's just really refreshing. Go ahead, Matt. Please ask the question.
Well, I was just like the one concern I might have there with Javonte and his usefulness in these preseason starts he's getting. He's sharing the floor with 4 guys who are all like legitimate threats off the so I guess DeMar is not a 3-point shooter. We've seen him shoot some threes so far this preseason,
It's
but
solid. Yeah.
you still have Lonzo, Zach, and Vooch out there launching threes in that starting lineup. If we're worried about the amount of legitimate 3-point shooting threats in this second unit, is Javonte less useful because he himself is not much of a shooter? That's the one thing that I'm already like a little bit worried about when it comes to like how much I love watching Javonte in these spot start minutes versus will he lose a little bit of that shine if maybe his lack of shooting flaw is exposed in the second unit where there's a lack of shooting overall.
That's actually a really good point. I never really considered that for the most part, right? It's like when you're playing with a certain set of guys, you can do incredibly well. And then for some guys, you just don't fit that well with. And in this instance with Javonte Green, in a second unit where there's not going to be as much scoring or shooting anyway, is it going to work, or is he going to look as good as you're seeing right now in the preseason? It's funny. I actually have so I do a hot takes video every week where I have all my subscribers send in like their Bulls hot takes. And one of the hot takes that I actually got for this week that I'll have up tomorrow is someone was saying that, hey, if Javonte Green continues to play the way that he has been, Patrick Williams is going to be coming off the bench. And obviously, I don't think that's going to be the case at all. There's no way that happens. But the thing is, now that you're saying that, I'm like, well, I mean, maybe Javonte Green kind of fits better on. I mean, it's a moot point. It's not going to happen. But it's
right.
Like, there is something to be said about Green being alongside 4 very talented players, 4 very talented scorers. Maybe that's what's making him look really good right now, and maybe it won't be the case coming off the bench.
Right. Well, and it's not just whoever sent that into you. We did, Big Dave. Didn't we have a voicemail that we did on our voicemail episode last week where somebody suggested the same thing? Like, bring Patrick Williams off the bench. Like, and Dave and I were both like,
I wonder if it was maybe it was the same guy. Who knows?
It could have been somebody who listens to us and watches you. Which, by the way, as Dave just threw in the ticker down there at the bottom of the screen, if you aren't already, subscribe to Jamal's Bulls Central channel on YouTube for his great content. He puts up videos that are all great all the time. And like us here on Locked On Bulls, he has fun guests. One time he had a dumb guest. It was me. All right, let's get big picture here, Jamal. I was just doing a Locked On NBA episode last night, breaking down the Eastern Conference hierarchy and rankings and projected rankings, and everybody has their take on where they see the Bulls finishing. So I'll give you a window. You can give me a window of like best possible seed outcome, worst possible seed outcome, and where in that range you see them most likely when it comes to how many wins is this team getting and what seed are they getting.
Well, this is really timely because the video that I uploaded earlier this morning was actually breaking down what I think, how things are going to stack up in the East among all 15 teams. But
go watch that video after this one.
Yes, right. Do it. Exactly. For the Bulls, for a range, I would say, here's the thing. Because the East is going to be competitive this year, probably the most competitive they've been in a better part of a decade, I really think that it can go really well for them, or it could not go so well for them. A lot of it just depends on how the roster fits, whether or not they buy into Billy Donovan's system, which all signs point to yes so far. But I would say a range of highest 3 seed, probably the lowest. I would, I know some people are like, oh, I would say it's a range between 3 and 12 seed. Like, no, I would say the minimum that I really see them falling to in the East is an 8 seed. I think anything less than 8 is an absolute disappointment and a failure of a season. I would even say anything less than a 6 seed. I'm just saying that because injuries can happen, we're still operating in a pandemic. There are going to be health and safety protocols. Things can happen where they may fall a little bit lower. But honestly, anything less than a 6 seed, with the changes that they made, the fact that they really went all in on guys like DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball, all the assets that they had to give up for those guys. Anything less than a 6 seed, in my view, is a disappointment. So I in my video, I had the Bulls finishing with the 5th seed. And I think, some Bulls fans, diehard Bulls fans, might not like that, saying, what are you talking about? We're title contenders. And it's like, well, it's going to take a little bit. I don't think that we need to start saying that, these guys should be a 1-2 seed after the moves that they made. They're going to be a good team. But there's still, are going to be some holes to their game. So that's that range. I would say 3 to 8. My ideal that I think that they should hit anyway is a 5 seed. And that's really because you still have a really strong team. You have the Bucks, the Nets, the Sixers. That whole Ben Simmons saga is still ongoing. I don't know what's going to happen there. The Heat, still a good team. You still have the Hawks. Is there
one team that you're like not buying in the East that other people are buying, whether it's Boston, Philly, Atlanta, Miami?
I definitely think that I'm not buying the Celtics as much, but I think that might not be a huge surprise to people because in a way they were almost exposed last year to an extent, right? They disappointed last year and falling all the way to the 7 seed. They got bounced in the first round of the playoffs. They also have a new head coach, first-time head coach. He's never head coached an NBA game anyway. And I think the other team that I'm not buying as much is the Hawks. And the reason I say that is because I do think that their season last year, I don't want to call it fluky, but I do think there's something to
fluky. I wouldn't mind.
I think that there's something. First of all, the new foul baiting rule that the NBA is coming out with, which I love, and I'm so happy they're doing that. I actually think that's going to impact Trae Young's game. I know most people are he's still an incredible shooter, and he's an incredible player, but he's going to have to work to get to the foul line, which he relied upon so much last year. And so I think that is going to impact their game. And I think also just because they're still young, they're not the best defensive team. I'm not 100% sold on them. I think most people have the Hawks above the Bulls. And to me, I'm just like, well, why? They didn't really do that much this offseason, which, okay, fine. They still have a good team, but the Bulls made significant moves this offseason, whereas the Hawks didn't. So those are the two teams, both the Hawks and the Celtics, that I don't think are going to be as good as some people are probably making them out to be.
I agree with you, and I slightly disagree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you definitely about the Bulls, for sure. I have them as a 6 seed, and I think anything, if a play-in is the bare minimum this year,
Yeah.
where it was the goal in previous seasons.
Right.
And I think if they're in the play-in, I'm extremely disappointed, and I will come on here yelling. I promise you that. I would not be happy if they end up in a play-in game. This is a
Makes mental
team that,
notes. Oh dear
yes,
God.
yes, learn to sit back from microphone and yell. But yeah, I would be completely disappointed. So yeah, definitely 5 or 6 seed. I definitely see that for the Bulls. Where I disagree with you is on the Hawks. Is I don't mind that they didn't make those moves. I don't think there were any moves for them to truly make.
Sure.
I think that they were already established and set in everything they pretty much had. That is a really complete team that they have over there. And what all they were lacking, in my opinion, was that experience. And the fact that they now know they can actually get there, no matter how they got there. The fact that they now know that, oh, it's possible. This is attainable. This is tangible. We've done this. We can actually get back there and do it again. For me, that lends credence to the fact that they'll actually be a little bit better. I'm not saying they're going to the finals. That's not what I'm saying at all. But this team is going to be a little bit tougher and a little bit stronger, I think, this year, in my opinion. It is definitely going to hurt Trae Young. It's going to hurt his game a lot. I'm looking at him and Harden and Luka. I'm looking at those guys, especially with that rule. But Trae Young, of course, because out of those three, he is the smallest one, and he relied on that a whole lot. But he is a really good point guard. And having guys like John Collins out there, and also Cam Reddish, who I think is really going to be awesome this year if he could stay healthy. I think he's really going to be big for them. So I think Atlanta's going to be a problem, man. I'm not scared of them. I think the Bulls can beat them. I'm not scared of anything, but I think when the seeding's in, I think they'll be higher. I think they'll be higher than the Bulls.
Well, and that's the thing about the East is, like, it wouldn't also shock me if the Atlanta Hawks finished with like the 3rd seed. It's like it can go so many different ways because it's a really talented conference this year. So I get that, I think I'm probably just a bit more skeptical than most people are when it comes to the Hawks.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm sure Hawks fans, are in the video that I posted earlier today are going to start roasting me and saying, like, how can you possibly think that the Bulls are going to be better than the Hawks? And it's just like, I mean, partially I'm biased because I'm a Bulls fan, but I think also just I'm looking more at the, the veteran experience that this Bulls team has over a team like the Hawks. Because you mentioned that's the thing. They're young guys. They're not as experienced. And you are right. It kind of actually, to be honest, it kind of reminds me of the D Rose year where Rose won the MVP, where the Bulls went all the way Eastern Conference Finals, and they just weren't ready. They didn't have the experience, right? And they just got their butts kicked by the Heat. And honestly, if Rose didn't get injured, I even hate bringing that story up. If he didn't get injured the following season, that might have been enough for them, that experience, because they knew what to expect, right? It's like, oh, we went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And maybe that's kind of similar to the Hawks. It's like they're going to have that additional edge because they were able to make that deep run, even if it was a Cinderella run. So yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, their seeding is going to be really important too, because if they end up playing the Bucks or the Nets, this is a moot point.
right
here.
For
so
sure.
Over for them for sure. So yeah,
well, we know that if the Bulls get matched up with Brooklyn in the first round, however that shakes out, we don't need to worry about Kyrie at home games or away games. So, good news there.
So crazy. So crazy.
So insane. So insane.
All right. I think that'll about do it for today's episode. Jamal, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really enjoyed chatting with you again. We should keep doing these crossover shows because they're a lot of fun. Again, like I said at the top of the show, if you are a Locked On Bulls listener and have not yet found Jamal's Bulls Central channel on YouTube, go do yourself a favor and subscribe to it right now, because he does great work putting up consistent videos, breaking down all Bulls topics and news, and has some fun guests on as well. So Jamal, thank you again for joining us, and go find his Bulls Central YouTube channel, and you can follow him on Twitter at Bulls Central with 2 L's in Central. Until next time, Jamal, take it easy, buddy.
Appreciate it, guys. It's been a pleasure. Enjoyed being on. Thank you.
That's it. We'll be on tomorrow with another fresh episode, me and Big Dave. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter. I'm at Bulls_Peck. Big Dave's at BalBAWL Sports. And hit us up on that text to voicemail line, 331-979-1369. For my co-host, Big Dave, and our great, wonderful guest, Jamal, Matt saying thanks for listening and watching. As always, Bulls Nation. See you, Red. Be good. Peace out.